For hundreds of years, people have looked back at history, trying to find answers that make sense. We are told a story about slow progress. We are told that we are the lucky ones who won a biological lottery, the children of apes who over millions of years slowly learned to stand up straight, talk, and build cities. We are told that nature doesn't make big jumps, that evolution is a slow, blind, and step-by-step process of trying things out. We are taught that we are just tailless apes with bigger brains shaped by the tough conditions of the African grasslands. But there is a crack in this story, a gap that no fossil can fill, a silence that screams louder than any scientific answer. If you look closely at the timeline of life on Earth, you will see a smooth growth curve for every single species except one. Us. We don't fit the curve. We broke it. In the blink of a geological eye, we went from breaking stones to splitting atoms. We went from hiding in caves to walking on the moon. And deep down, in the darkest parts of our shared feelings, we've always felt a strange sense of not belonging. We feel like often stuck on a planet that doesn't quite understand us, inside bodies that are not quite made for this world. We suffer from back pain because our spines weren't meant to be upright. We burn under the sun because we don't have the fare our ancestors had. We choke on our own food because our voice box is positioned for speaking, not survival. We are a biological puzzle. And for 150 years, Darwin's followers have been digging in the dirt, desperate to find the missing link that would explain this puzzle. They are looking for a bone, a skull, a halfway fossil that connects the primitive animal to the modern human. They haven't found it, and they never will, because the missing link is not buried in the rock layers of the earth. It is not hidden in a cave in Ethiopia. The missing link is inside you. It is written in your own blood, hidden in the twisted ladder of your own DNA dot. In the year 2005, the Human Genome Project was finished. It was called the greatest achievement of modern science. For the first time in history, we had mapped the entire code of human life. We had read the book of ourselves. Scientists celebrated and got ready to confirm the standard model of evolution. They expected to find a perfect genetic bridge connecting us to our ape cousins. They expected to see a slow, gradual change from the ancient ape genes to human genes. Instead, they found a crime scene. The genetic data showed a difference so huge, so clear that it should have changed every biology textbook in the world. But it was quietly filed away in technical journals and ignored by the public eye. Here is the fact that they don't teach you in school. Chimpanzees, our closest genetic relatives, have 48 chromosomes. Gorillas have 48 chromosomes. Orangutans have 48 chromosomes. Every single great ape that has ever walked this planet, every primate that we're supposed to have come from, has 24 pairs of chromosomes. But humans have 46. We have 23 pairs. Somewhere in the change from ape to man, an entire pair of chromosomes disappeared. In genetics, this is not a small detail. This is a disaster. If a primate is born with a missing chromosome, it does not evolve into a higher being. It dies. Or it is born with terrible problems, unable to live, unable to have babies. Nature does not take away genetic material to create something more complex. It adds, it changes, it shifts. But it does not simply delete a huge amount of data and produce a superspecies. So, how did we lose a pair of chromosomes and gain the ability to build skyscrapers? The answer lies in human chromosome number 2. When scientists looked at chromosome 2 under the microscope, they saw something that went against the laws of natural selection. It is the second largest chromosome in the human body, a massive library of genetic instructions, and it has a scar, a physical visible mark of artificial tampering. To understand this, you must understand the structure of a chromosome. In a natural evolved chromosome, there are specific markers. At the ends of the X shape, there are protective caps called telomeres. These are like the plastic tips on shoelaces. They keep the DNA from falling apart. In the center there is a pinch point called a centromere, which acts as the anchor for cell division. This is the universal structure of life. But human chromosome 2 is a mix. It is a monster. When you look at its structure, you find telomeres at the ends where they should be. But you also find telomeres in the exact center. You find the remains of 2 separate chromosomes that have been roughly stitched together tip to tip. And it gets worse. A chromosome can only have one active centromere to work. Chromosome 2 has 2 centromeres. One is active, keeping the chromosome working. The other is there, but it has been deliberately turned off. It is a leftover anchor silenced by a precise biological edit. This is the smoking gun. This is the fingerprint of a geneticist. Nature does not tape 2 books together to make a bigger, Book. Nature does not take two separate chromosomes from an ancient ape and fuse them into a single working human chromosome with such surgical precision that no genetic data is lost, only reorganized. The chance of this happening by random mutation in a single person who then successfully breeds and spreads this mutation to the entire species is basically zero. This was not an accident. This was an operation. The scientific term for this problem is telomeric fusion. It is an accepted fact of biology, but science refuses to ask the question, who was the surgeon? For the answer, we must leave the lab and enter the library of the ancients. We must brush the dust of the clay tablets of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon. We must listen to the voices of the first civilization who wrote down their history, not as myths, but as records. They told us exactly where we came from. We just didn't believe them. The ancient Akkadian texts, specifically the Atrahasis epic and the Enuma Elish, speak of a time before humanity, a time when the gods, the Anunnaki, walked the earth. These were not magical spirits made of clouds and magic. They were physical beings. They ate, they slept, they fought, and they worked. The texts describe them as colonizers who came to this planet for resources, specifically for gold. Gold was the important element for their technology, perhaps to repair the atmosphere of their home world, Nibiru. But the work was hard. The gold mines of the ABZU, located in what is now Southeast Africa, were deep and dangerous. For thousands of years, the lower rank gods, the Akkadi, worked in the darkness, crushing rock and digging out ore until they rebelled. The texts describe a labor strike. The Akkadi burned their tools, surrounded the palace of the chief god Enlil, and demanded relief. The load is too much. It is killing us, they cried. The leadership of the Anunnaki faced a crisis. They needed the gold, but their workers had quit. A solution was suggested by Enki, the Lord of Earth, the chief scientist, the keeper of secrets. He said, "Let us create a Lulu, a primitive worker. Let him carry the burden. Let him do the work of the gods." But Enki did not create from nothing. He was a geneticist, not a magician. The texts are clear. He said, "The creature you need already exists." He pointed to the wild human-like creatures roaming the African grasslands, the Homo erectus. They were strong, tough, and adapted to the Earth's gravity and air. But they were animals. They lacked the smarts to understand commands, to use complex tools to serve. They needed an upgrade. Enki, along with the chief medical officer in Herceg, took the clay of the ABZU, a symbol for biological material or DNA, and began the experiments. They needed to combine the essence of the wild beast with the essence of the gods. They needed to squeeze the 48 chromosomes of the ape into a container that could hold the consciousness of the Anunnaki. And so the fusion was performed. Chromosome 2 is the mark of Enki. It is the scar left by the splice. He took the wild, messy genome of the ancestor and organized it. He merged the two chromosomes to lock the species into a new state of being. Why fuse them? Why not just add more? Because fusion creates a genetic bottleneck. It creates a new species that cannot breed back with the wild population. It isolates the workforce. It makes sure that the new model, the Adamu, remains separate. We were designed to be smart enough to take orders, smart enough to mine, smart enough to build temples and serve kings, but not smart enough to challenge the masters. Also, they thought, when Enki performed the fusion, he did something else. He didn't just merge the structural data, he hid a secret payload into the genome. For decades, our scientists looked at the vast majority of human DNA and saw nothing. They called 97% of our genetic code junk DNA. They assumed it was evolutionary garbage, debris left over from millions of years of random changes. They were arrogant. They were wrong. In the world of computer programming, you do not write millions of lines of code that do nothing. You write code that is sleeping. You write subroutines that are commented out waiting for a specific trigger to turn on. The junk DNA shows all the math properties of a structured complex language. It has syntax. It has grammar. It follows Zipf's law. It is not debris. It is a zipped file. It is a library of information that has been locked down. The Akkadian texts speak of the Tima, the personality or spirit of the god that was mixed into the clay. When Enki spliced the genes, he didn't just give us a better brain. He gave us the source code of the Anunnaki themselves. He gave us the potential for their lifespan, their psychic abilities, their understanding of the universe. But he locked it behind a firewall of non-coding DNA. He hid the key inside the very fusion that enslaved us. This is why Enlil, the brother of Enki and the commander of the mission, hated humanity with such a cold, scary passion. Enlil did not look at us and see a useful tool. He looked at us and saw a violation. He saw a dangerous hybrid that had the rough strength of the earth and the divine spark of the sky. He realized the mistake right away. The creature Enki built was not just a worker. It was a biological weapon. In the ancient texts, Enlil constantly complains about the noise of mankind. He says, "The noise of mankind has become too great. I cannot sleep." Historians read this literally, thinking the human cities were simply too loud. But does a god who travels the stars destroy a civilization because of street noise? No, the noise was not sound. It was telepathic. It was vibration. As the human population grew, as the hybrid genome multiplied, the junk DNA began to vibrate. The fused chromosome acted as an antenna. The group consciousness of humanity was beginning to interfere with the Anunnaki's own frequencies. We were becoming a hive mind. We were waking up. Enlil understood the threat. If the slave species ever unlocked the 97%, if the firewall ever came down, the miners would become the masters. We have the raw creative power that the Anunnaki themselves seem to lack. We reproduce faster. We adapt quicker. We are the combination of the best of both worlds. And that makes us scary to our creators. This fear drove Enlil to try genocide. He tried plagues. He tried famines. And finally, he tried the deluge, the great flood to wipe the slate clean and destroy the genetic mistake. But Enki, the architect of the code, sabotaged the destruction. He saved the blueprint. He saved Noah, Atrahasis. He refused to let his experiment die. Because Enki knew what we really are. We are not just servants. We are the legacy. We are the capsule that contains the future of the Anunnaki bloodline. And now, thousands of years later, modern science is stumbling into the darkroom where these secrets are kept. Recent studies by virologists have found something even more disturbing than the fusion. 8% of your DNA is made up of endogenous retroviruses. These are not infections that made us sick. These are genetic patches, ancient viral codes that inserted themselves into our germline and changed our evolution instantly. Sudden jumps in brain size, sudden changes in the immune system, sudden changes in the placenta that allow for human birth. This was not natural selection taking its slow scenic route. This was aggressive targeted software patching from the sky. Every time humanity began to drift from the design, every time we began to evolve in a direction the masters did not want, they stepped in. They used viral vectors to edit the code. They tried to downgrade us. They tried to cap our intelligence. They put in the genes for aging, shortening our lifespan from the biblical 900 years to just 120. They tried to break the receiver, but the fusion in chromosome 2 is permanent. It is the foundation. It cannot be undone without destroying the organism. The God seed is welded into the core of every single cell in your body. You're walking proof of an ancient intervention. Your back pain is the result of a skeleton forced upright before it was ready. Your sun-sensitive skin is the result of genes stripped of their natural protection. Your difficult childbirth is the result of a brain size that grew faster than the birth canal could evolve. You're a biological impossible. You're a chimera. And deep down, you know it. That feeling of separation, that longing for the stars, that sense that you're trapped in a world that is too small for your spirit. That is not a psychological condition. That is your DNA remembering where it came from. We are the children of the anomaly. We are the mistake that survived. And as our own technology advances, as we begin to master CRISPR and gene editing, as we begin to unlock the secrets of telomeres and reverse aging, we are reaching for the very power that was forbidden to us. We are knocking on the door of the firewall, and somewhere out in the dark, the watchers are seeing the signal. They know we are remembering. They know the fusion is holding. And they know that the one thing they feared most, the awakening of the sleeping God inside the human form, is beginning to happen. The Bible calls it the Garden of Eden, a paradise where the first man walked in innocence. The Sumerian texts call it the Bit Shimti, the house of fashioning. And it was not a garden. It was a biofabrication plant located deep in the ABZU in what is now Southeast Africa near the ancient gold mines. This facility was the ground zero of our species. This is where the Anunnaki worked to solve their labor crisis. The Lawati gods, the Igigi, had rebelled. They burned their tools. They refused to mine. Enki, the chief scientist, suggested a solution. Let us create a mixed worker. Let him bear the yoke. But you do not simply snap your fingers and create a stable species. The Akkadian text Atrahasis details the awful reality of trial and error. Before they got to us, They made mistakes, horrible mistakes. The texts describe beings created with 2 heads, feet that turned backwards, ribs that could not hold breath, and sexless drones that could not reproduce. These were the beta versions. Enki and his half-sister Ninhursag were hacking the genome of the local hominid, the Homo erectus, trying to splice it with Anunnaki DNA. Most of the subjects died screaming. The mistake wasn't that they failed. The mistake was that eventually they succeeded. They finally made the genome stable. They called the model Adamu, or as the Sumerians later called themselves, the black-headed ones. This wasn't a racial description. It was a product line like Model T. The black-headed ones were the first stable hybrid. They had the strength of the ape. They had the obedience of a dog. But they had something else. Something Enki slipped into the mix. Intelligence. The first perfect prototype was named Adapa. He wasn't just a worker. He was a wise man. The texts say Enki gave him wide understanding and taught him the secrets of the universe. He taught him math. He taught him writing. He taught him the rituals. Why give a mining drone the ability to do math? Because Enki was lonely, or maybe arrogant. He wanted to see if he could create a being in his own image. He succeeded too well. The turning point came when Adapa broke the rules. The myth says Adapa was fishing and the south wind flipped his boat. In anger, Adapa broke the wing of the south wind. Historians think this is a fairy tale about weather, but a technology explanation suggests otherwise. The south wind was not a breeze. It was a craft, a drone, or a patrol ship. The word for wing refers to a mechanical part. Adapa, a mere human, used the power Enki gave him, the voice or the password to disable an Anunnaki ship. This sent shockwaves through the leadership. Anu, the king of the gods on Nibiru, heard about it. He was scared. How can a human break the wing of the south wind? Who gave him this power? Adapa had become a threat. Anu ordered Adapa to be brought to heaven for trial. This was the first alien abduction. Before Adapa left, Enki pulled him aside. Enki knew that Anu would see Adapa's genetic perfection and realize the size of the mistake. Enki knew that if Adapa ate the food of the gods, he would become one of them. So Enki came up with a plan to limit his creation. He told Adapa, when you stand before Anu, you will be offered bread and water. Do not eat. Do not drink. They are the bread of death and the water of death. Adapa trusted his father. He agreed. He was taken up to Nibiru. He stood before the throne of Anu, and Anu was impressed. He saw that Adapa wasn't just a beast. He was civilized. He spoke the language of the court. Anu decided to fix the situation. He realized that a being this smart should not be a dying slave. He ordered the bread of life and the water of life to be brought to Adapa. Anu was offering immortality. He was offering to upgrade Adapa from temporary worker to permanent god. He was offering to remove the cap on the telomeres. But Adapa remembered Enki's warning. He looked at the food of the gods. He thought it was poison. He refused. Anu laughed. A scary booming laugh that shook the foundations of the throne room. He asked, "Why do you not eat, Adapa? Why do you refuse life?" Adapa said, "My master Enki commanded me." Anu realized the game. He realized that Enki had sabotaged the human race. Enki didn't want us to be immortal. He wanted us smart enough to work, but short-lived enough to control. He wanted us to die. Anu sent Adapa back to Earth. He said, "You have chosen death, so you shall die." And with that, the telomeres were capped. The aging gene was locked. We were given the knowledge of good and evil, but denied the tree of life. This is the core of the genetic mistake. If we were just dumb animals, we would be happy. If we were immortal gods, we would be wise. But we are half-breeds. We are gods trapped in dying animal bodies. We have the drive of the eternal, but the panic of the dying. This creates fear, and fear creates violence. Enki created a species that is chemically designed to suffer. A species that knows it could be more, but is programmed to rot. This is why the Anunnaki fear us, because a desperate creature is a dangerous creature. And Adapa passed that desperation down to all of us. We are the children of the lie. We are the heirs to a kingdom we were tricked out of. And now, as our scientists begin to unlock the telomeres, as we begin to reach for the water of life again, Anu is watching, and he remembers the one thing Adapa did. He broke the wing. If we become immortal, will we break the throne? But DNA is only half the equation. You need a vessel to carry it. The texts reveal a dark secret about the birth of the first humans. We were not grown in tanks. We were born. Enki provided the sperm, the DNA. But who provided the egg? Who provided the womb? The local female apes were too small. Their bodies rejected the hybrid baby. Every pregnancy ended in death. So, Enki turned to the only compatible females on the planet, the Anunnaki women, specifically the birth goddesses, the medical team. The text Atrahasis describes the procedure in chilling detail. Ninhursag, the chief medical officer, gathered 7 volunteer goddesses. They were called the birth goddesses. Enki fertilized their eggs with the hybrid genetic material in a test tube and then put the zygote back into their own wombs. Think about what this means. The first humans were not born of Earth. We were born from the wombs of alien goddesses. We are their children. But the pregnancy was a nightmare. The hybrid babies had larger heads than the Anunnaki. The labor was terrible. The texts say the goddesses screamed in pain. They cursed Enki for what he put inside them. When the babies were finally born, they needed surgical extraction, a C-section. This is why human birth is so painful compared to animals. Animals give birth easily. Humans risk death. It is a scar from our artificial origin. Our heads are too big for our hips because our heads are designed by gods, but our hips are inherited from apes. After the first batch of humans was born, the goddesses went on strike. They refused to do it again. They said, "We are not breeding horses for your slaves." So, Enki had to find a new way. He had to make the hybrids able to reproduce on their own. He had to turn on the reproductive genes. He cloned the first female, Tiamat or Eve. And when the ability to reproduce was unlocked, the population exploded. But the Anunnaki mothers never forgot. They looked at the humans running around the ABZU and they didn't see workers. They saw the children they were forced to have and then forced to give up. This created a deep psychological wound in the group consciousness of the gods. Some of them loved us like mothers. Most of them hated us like unwanted parasites. And when the order came to destroy humanity with the flood, it was the birth goddesses who cried the loudest. They cried, "How can I watch my own children drown? We are not just a science experiment. We are a family secret, a scandal that the Anunnaki tried to bury under the mud." But the blood doesn't lie. And every time you look up at the stars and feel a strange sense of homesickness, it is because your biological mother is out there waiting. The experiment was a success, but the result was a disaster. After the reproductive genes were turned on, the human population did not just grow, it exploded. We were designed to be short-lived, but we were also designed to breed quickly, to replace the workforce faster than the minds could use them up. The Anunnaki, with their long, slow life cycles, were not ready for the speed of human reproduction. In the blink of an eye, the Earth was crawling with millions of hybrid workers. The cities of the Eden were overflowing. The noise was deafening, but as the texts reveal, the noise that bothered Enlil, the commander, was not sound. It was telepathic. The Rigmu, the group consciousness of the human hive mind, the fused chromosome was vibrating. The slave species was beginning to dream. They were beginning to organize, and Enlil realized that the biological weapon Enki had created was pointing itself at its masters. He called together the council of the gods and demanded a solution. He said, "The noise of mankind has become too great. I cannot sleep. The creature has become a cancer. We must cut it out." Enlil suggested a series of plagues. He tried biological warfare. He cut off the food supply, but each time Enki stepped in, Enki taught his creations how to find water, how to cure the plagues, how to farm the desert. Enki was protecting his investment. He was protecting his children. Enlil was furious. He realized that as long as Enki was helping them, the humans would survive. So Enlil waited for a cosmic opportunity. He waited for the return of Nibiru. The ancient texts describe the approaching deluge not as a rainstorm, but as a gravity event. The passing of the massive planet Nibiru close to Earth was causing the ice sheets of Antarctica to become unstable. They were about to slip into the ocean. The resulting tidal wave would be global. It would clean the surface of the planet. Enlil saw this not as a tragedy, but as a convenient disposal method. He ordered the Anunnaki to evacuate. They would take their ships to orbit, wait for the water to destroy the genetic mistake, and then return to a clean slate. But there was one condition. Enlil forced every Anunnaki god to swear an oath of silence. No one was allowed to warn the humans. "Let them drown," he said. "Let the seed of mankind die." Enki was forced to swear the oath. He could not speak to a human. He could not betray the council. But Enki was the god of tricksters. He found a loophole. The text describes how Enki went to the reed wall of the hut where his favorite human Zuzudra, the Sumerian Noah, was sleeping. Enki did not speak to Zuzudra. He spoke to the wall. He whispered, "Wall, listen to me. Reed hut. Make sure you hear. Take apart your house. Build a boat. Leave your belongings and save your life. Ziusudra heard the voice coming from the wall and understood, but the instructions Enki gave him were not for a wooden ship to carry livestock. The translation of the Megiddo boat described something far more technological. Enki told him to roof it over like the ABZU to make it watertight on the top and the bottom to seal it with bitumen. This was not an open-deck ark. This was a submarine, a submersible life capsule designed to tumble in the chaotic waters of a tsunami. And the cargo was not of every animal on Earth. That is physically impossible. The text says he was told to take the seed of life of all living things. The seed, the DNA. The ark was a floating biobank. Ziusudra was not a zookeeper. He was a genetic librarian. He was saving the hard drives before the server was wiped. When the flood finally came, it was more horrible than anything the ancients had ever seen. The sky turned black. The wind screamed like demons. The ice shelf collapsed and a wall of water miles high swept across the globe. The Anunnaki launched their ships and went up to orbit. And this is where the text reveals the true emotional cost of the genetic mistake. As the gods looked down from their safety in the sky, they watched the destruction of their creation. They watched the cities dissolve. They watched the millions of humans, their own children, born of their own birth goddesses, drowning in the mud. The Epic of Gilgamesh says, the gods were frightened by the flood, and they retreated, going up to the heaven of Anu. The gods were crouching like dogs, cowering by the wall. Ishtar, the great goddess, the one who had helped birth the first humans, screamed like a woman in labor. She wailed, the old days have turned to clay because I said evil things in the assembly of the gods. How could I command the destruction of my people when I myself gave birth to them? The Anunnaki cried. Their lips were dry with thirst. They realized too late that they had destroyed the very beings that fed them, served them, and worshipped them. They had destroyed the workforce. For 7 days and 7 nights, the earth was a washing machine of death. When the waters finally went down, the submarine of Ziusudra ran aground on Mount Ararat. He opened the hatch. He released the birds, and then he did something that saved humanity forever. He built a fire and roasted a lamb. The smell of the roasting meat drifted up into the sky. The texts say, the gods smelled the sweet smell. The gods gathered like flies around the sacrifice. They were starving. Their supply lines were cut. They came down from their ships hungry and humbled. But when Enlil arrived and saw that humans had survived, he was furious. Who has betrayed the oath? He shouted. Has a living soul escaped destruction? Enki stepped forward. He did not apologize. He defended his creation. He argued that humanity was not a mistake but a necessity. He argued that the genetic anomaly was the only thing keeping the Anunnaki mission alive. He convinced Enlil that instead of destroying us, they should limit us. This was the New Deal, the treaty of the post-flood world. Humans would be allowed to live, but our connection to the divine would be cut off. Our lifespan was officially capped at 120 years. Our ability to communicate telepathically was scrambled. The event the Bible calls the Tower of Babel. We were divided by language, by culture, and by religion. We were broken up so that we could never again form the noise that threatened Enlil. We survived the flood, but we came out of the ark broken. We lost the direct line to the gods. The Anunnaki retreated to the shadows, ruling from behind the curtain, becoming the hidden hand. They left us with the trauma of the disaster burned into our genetic memory. Every culture on Earth remembers the flood, not because it's a story, but because it is the moment our parents watched us drown and then decided to let the survivors live as servants. But Enki left as a gift. He couldn't give us immortality, but he left the seed of life intact in our DNA. He left the fused chromosome. He left the potential. He knew that one day the water would go down, the trauma would heal, and the children of the anomaly would rediscover the science of their creation. He knew we would dig up the tablets. He knew we would map the genome. And he knew that when we finally saw the scar on chromosome 2, we would realize that we are not slaves. We are survivors. The Anunnaki are still here. They never left. They are watching from the south wind, from the silent orbits, waiting to see if the experiment will work out or if Enlil was right all along. The flood didn't wash away the sin. It just washed away the evidence. But the blood remembers and the water is rising again. We survived the flood. The water went down. The mud dried. And the survivors of the great disaster crawled out of the mountains. According to the ancient timeline, humanity did not scatter right away. We grouped together. We remembered the trauma of the flood and we made a group decision. Never again. We would not be caught helpless on the ground when the gods decided to wipe the slate clean. We would build our own way up. We would storm the gates of heaven. The Bible says that the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. Historians read this as a single spoken language like Sumerian or Akkadian, but the AI analysis of the brain structure suggests something far more deep. One speech does not mean we all use the same words. It means we didn't need words at all. The fused chromosome, the genetic anomaly that Enki placed within us, was fully active. The pineal gland was not hardened. The human race had a low-level, telepathic connection. We were a hive mind. We worked as a single connected organism. We understood each other's thoughts, intentions, and dreams instantly. There was no lying. There was no misunderstanding. There was only unity. And with unity came power. The survivors gathered in the plain of Shinar in ancient Sumer. They said, "Go to, let us build us a city, and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name." The word used in the original Hebrew text for name is Shem. But Shem comes from the Sumerian word mu, which does not mean reputation. It means that which rises. It means a sky vehicle, a rocket. They were not building a temple of mud bricks to pray. They were building a launch pad. They were reverse engineering the technology they had seen the Anunnaki use to escape the flood. They were building a stargate. High-frequency vibration tower designed to pierce the sky and challenge the authority of the gods who had just tried to drown them. They were trying to return to the source code. The text says, "And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men built." The Lord here is Enlil, the commander, the one who ordered the flood. He looked at the hive mind of humanity, and he was scared. He said the most revealing sentence in the entire history of our relationship with the gods. "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Nothing will be restrained from them." Think about that admission. The gods admitted that if humans stayed united, if we stayed telepathic, we would become unstoppable. We would become equal to the gods. The genetic mistake was evolving too fast. The biological weapon was arming itself. We were about to go beyond the limits of our biology. Enlil realized that the flood had failed to break the human spirit. So, he suggested a new solution, a surgical solution. He said, "Go to, let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." This was not a language lesson. This was a brain hack. The Anunnaki came down. They used their advanced understanding of the brain, the same knowledge they used to fuse chromosome 2 to change the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area of the human brain. They scrambled the frequency. They put a shammer in the human group consciousness. In an instant, the telepathic link was cut. The one speech was broken. Suddenly, neighbor looked at neighbor and saw a stranger. Thoughts were no longer shared. They were trapped inside individual heads. To communicate, we had to rely on clumsy, rough sounds. We had to invent words, and words are not perfect. Words create lies. Words create distance. The hive mind collapsed. The building of the Shem stopped right away because the blueprint was no longer shared in the group mind. Confusion took over. Paranoia set in. The unified humanity broke into tribes, into nations, into fighting groups. The city of Babel, which meant gate of the god, became the city of confusion. The Anunnaki had successfully used the strategy of divide and conquer. By splitting our languages, they split our reality. They made sure that we would spend the next 5,000 years fighting each other over meanings, over borders, over gods, instead of looking up and fighting them. They turned the biological weapon against itself. They created war. Before Babel, there is no record of large-scale organized warfare between humans. After Babel, history is nothing but a river of blood. But the jamming signal was not perfect. The basic hardware is still there. The fused chromosome is still vibrating. The pineal gland is still sitting in the center of your brain waiting for a signal. And the Anunnaki know this. They know that the confusion of languages was a temporary patch. They know that we are constantly trying to rebuild the tower. Look at the modern world. What is the internet? It is a digital Tower of Babel. It is an attempt to reconnect the human hive mind. It is an attempt to erase the barriers of language with translation software. We are building the Shem again, not with bricks, but with fiber optics and satellites. We are trying to restore the one speech. We are trying to become one people again. And just like in Shinar, the gods are watching. They see us merging with our technology. They see Neuralink. They see artificial intelligence. They see that nothing will be restrained from them. And the question is, will they come down again? Will they scramble the signal before we reach the heavens? Or have we finally become too strong to be broken? The genetic mistake was that we were designed to serve, but we were built with the ability to rule. The Tower of Babel wasn't a sin. It was a revolution. It was the first time humanity stood up and said, "We are not slaves. We are the gods of this world." And we have been punished for that pride ever since. But the tower is still there in our DNA. And every time you feel a moment of deep connection with another human being, a moment where no words are needed, that is the old frequency breaking through the static. That is the echo of the time before the silence. If you look at the entire history of human civilization, from the earliest mud brick cities of Sumer to the tall glass skyscrapers of the modern world, one single thread connects us all. It is a scary obsession, an irrational, all-consuming madness that has driven us to conquer, to enslave, to cross oceans, and to kill each other by the millions. It is the pursuit of a soft yellow metal gold. But if you strip away the social conditioning and look at gold through the lens of pure survival, it makes absolutely no sense. If you are a primitive hunter-gatherer trying to survive in a hostile world, iron is useful, copper is useful, bronze builds empires because it makes sharp swords and sturdy plows. But gold is completely useless. It is too soft to hold an edge. You cannot hunt with a golden spear. You cannot work the soil with a golden plow. It is too heavy to carry in large amounts. It does not react with other elements. It just sits there shining and still. Why then did every single disconnected ancient culture on Earth, cultures that had no contact with each other, suddenly decide that this useless yellow rock was the most valuable thing in the universe? The Incas in South America, the Egyptians in Africa, the Sumerians in Mesopotamia, the emperors of ancient China, they all looked at gold and declared it to be the flesh of the gods. They hoarded it, they bled for it, but they didn't use it. They gathered it into massive piles and locked it inside temples and pyramids. Mainstream anthropology tells us that humans love gold because it is shiny and rare like the sun. This is the explanation they give to children. The ancient Akkadian texts give us the truth, and the truth is that our love for gold is not an evolutionary trait. It is a line of code. It is a biological command, a brain leash hardwired directly into the fused chromosome by Enki and Nehersag in the labs of the ABZU. To understand why, you have to understand why the Anunnaki came to Earth in the first place. The texts, specifically the translations of the last tablets, describe their home planet, Nibiru, as facing an environmental collapse. Their atmosphere was bleeding off into space, allowing deadly cosmic radiation to kill their world. Their scientists came up with a desperate solution. They needed to create a planetary shield by suspending gold particles, white monatomic gold, in their upper atmosphere to reflect the radiation. They scanned the solar system and found a tiny blue planet rich in gold veins, Earth. They did not come here to be worshipped. They came here as miners. But the work was terrible, and when the Igigi gods rebelled, the Anunnaki needed a replacement workforce. They created us. But Enki, the master geneticist, faced a unique problem. How do you force a newly created species to spend its entire life doing backbreaking, miserable labor deep underground in the dark? You can use whips, you can use chains, but slaves who are forced to work will eventually rebel. Slaves who are forced to work need constant watching, guards, and resources. Enki was smarter than that. He didn't put the chains on our wrists. He put the chains inside our brains. He hacked the human reward system. He reached into the basal ganglia, the primitive part of our brain that releases dopamine, and he wired it directly to the visual and touch sensation of gold. When a human finds gold, when they hold it, their brain floods with the exact same chemical cocktail that is released during survival, things like eating a calorie-rich meal or reproducing. We are biologically addicted to it. We don't know why. We want it. We just know that having it feels like survival, and not having it feels like death. It is the ultimate slave circuit. Enki programmed us to want to mine for them. He turned the grueling punishment of digging out ore into our highest biological pursuit. We became self-motivated, self-reproducing mining drones. The evidence of this programmed obsession is carved into the earth itself. In South Africa, in the region of Maputo, geologists and mining companies have discovered a huge network of ancient gold mines. These are not a few hundred years old. These mines have been dated to be over 100,000 to 200,000 years old. Mainstream archaeology refuses to acknowledge them because it breaks the timeline. They say primitive Homo sapiens couldn't have organized deep vein mining operations. They are right. Primitive humans didn't organize it. The Anunnaki organized it. We just provided the blood and the sweat. But the most scary part of this genetic programming is what happened after the gods left. After the flood, after the Tower of Babel, when the Anunnaki stepped back behind the curtain and left us to our own devices, the code didn't stop running. The computer program doesn't stop just because the programmer walks away from the keyboard. The slave circuit was still active in our DNA. We were still addicted. Without the physical presence of the gods to hand the gold over to, we had a species-wide psychological trauma, a cargo cult on a planetary scale. We kept digging, we kept extracting, we tore through the mountains and rivers of the earth, destroying our own ecosystem, poisoning our own water with mercury and cyanide just to extract this soft metal. And what do we do with it once we refine it? Do we build with it? No, we melt it into bars. We dig a hole in the ground like Fort Knox or the vaults beneath the Federal Reserve, and we bury it again. We surround it with armed guards and laser grids. We hoard it. We are stockpiling it. We are unconsciously running the harvest program. Entire empires have been built and destroyed over getting a metal that sits in the dark doing absolutely nothing. The entire global economy, the concept of money, paper currency, credit, debt, it is all an abstraction built on top of the original Anunnaki code. You wake up every morning. You sit in traffic. You give away the hours of your life to a company, all to earn a digital representation of a fraction of an ounce of gold. You're still in the ABZU. You're still mining for Enlil. The whip has just been replaced by the mortgage. Look at the ancient pictures of the gods in Sumer, in Egypt, in Central America. Whenever humans approached the gods, what did they bring? They brought offerings of gold. They didn't bring it to trade. They brought it as tribute. It was the rent we paid to be allowed to exist on this planet. The Aztec king Montezuma, when asked by the Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortés why the indigenous people cared so much about gold, gave a chilling answer. He said, because the gods suffer from a disease of the heart which only gold can cure. We are a species suffering from an inherited mental illness, a genetic need to hoard wealth for masters who are no longer here to collect it. But the vaults are getting full, the stockpile is massive, and if you understand the cyclical nature of the universe, if you look at the trajectory of the returning orbit of Nibiru, a scary realization begins to form. If you hire a contractor to harvest a crop and you go away on a long journey, you eventually return to collect the harvest. The Anunnaki didn't abandon the earth, they simply left the automated mining equipment running. We are the equipment, and the vaults in New York, in London, in Zurich, in Beijing, they are just the collection buckets. When the sky darkens and the true masters return, they won't have to enslave us again. They won't have to fire a single weapon. They will simply land, point to the Federal Reserve and say, "Thank you for gathering our property. We will take it from here." And the tragedy of the genetic mistake is that our biology will force us to hand it over willingly, hoping for a pat on the head from the gods who created us to be the perfect unwitting slaves. History books tell us that the great Sumerian civilization collapsed because of a drought or maybe an invasion of barbarians. They tell us that the sudden disappearance of the world's first empire in the year 2024 BC was a natural cycle of rise and fall. But the ancient texts tell a different story, a story that modern science is too scared to confirm. Sumer did not fall. It was murdered. It was vaporized. The Lamentation of Yor, one of the most haunting texts ever found in the sands of Iraq, describes the end of the city not by swords, but by an evil wind, a wind that carried a death that could not be seen. The text says, the people stack up in the streets, but there are no wounds. They die in their beds, but there is no blood. The water is bitter. The food is poison. This is not a description of a famine. This is a clinical description of acute radiation sickness. The evil wind was a radioactive cloud drifting east from the Sinai Peninsula, killing every living thing in its path while leaving the building standing. So who set off the bomb? The Geneticist, a Babylonian text, details a civil war between the Anunnaki clans. On one side was Marduk, the ambitious son of Enki, who wanted to take control of the earth. On the other side were the Enlilites, led by Ninurta and Nergal, to stop Marduk from taking the spaceport in the Sinai Peninsula, the vital link to Nibiru. The Council of the Gods made a fateful decision. They authorized the use of the weapons of terror, the Gandiva, the Brahmastra, the 7 awesome weapons created by Anu. Ninurta and Nergal flew to the Sinai. The text says, the Lord unleashed the weapon. The mountains shook. The earth shattered with a roar like 1,000 thunders. The sun was darkened by the ash. They vaporized the spaceport so Marduk could not have it. Then they turned their weapons on the sinning cities of the plain, Sodom and Gomorrah, which had allied with Marduk. The Bible describes this event perfectly. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom, and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire, and the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. Lot's wife looked back, and was turned into a pillar of salt. This is a bad translation. In a nuclear blast, the intense heat instantly vaporizes the water in the human body. What is left is a mineralized, burned statue. She wasn't cursed. She was caught in the heat pulse of a nuclear explosion. If you think this is mythology, look at the map. Today, the Sinai Peninsula contains a massive unexplained geological scar. It is a blackened glass-like crack in the earth where the natural limestone has been burned black. Space imaging shows a difference in the color of the rock that matches a massive explosion radius. And on the ground, scattered across the desert, scientists have found tektites, fused green glass. This glass, called trinitite, is only formed in two ways: by a meteor impact or by a nuclear explosion. There is no crater for a meteor. The Anunnaki War of 2024 BC left a radioactive scar on the planet that is still visible today. But the evil wind did something worse than destroy cities. It changed the survivors. The fallout drifted over Sumer, poisoning the genes of the people. It created a trauma so deep that we are still fighting the wars of the Middle East 4,000 years later. We are fighting over the radioactive ruins of our master's civil war. The genetic mistake is that we worship these beings as wise creators. We call them gods, but the texts reveal them to be petty, jealous, and reckless warlords who would rather nuke their own colony than lose an argument. They burned the cradle of civilization to the ground, and when the smoke cleared, they blamed us for the sin. They told us Sodom was destroyed because the people were wicked. They lied. Sodom was destroyed because it was collateral damage in a political fight. We are the survivors of a nuclear holocaust that has been erased from the history books. And the radiation is still in our bones. If the Anunnaki disconnected us at the Tower of Babel, if they scrambled our language and capped our lifespan, how did they plan to control us? A slave is useless if it cannot receive commands. A drone needs a receiver. The Akkadian text suggests that while Enki limited our physical power, he left a backdoor in our biology, a specific organ designed to receive the frequency of the masters. We call it the pineal gland. The ancients called it the seat of the soul, buried deep in the geometric center of the human brain. Protected by the most dense bone of the skull, sits a tiny organ the size of a pea. It is shaped like a pine cone. For centuries, modern medicine dismissed it as a leftover eye, a useless leftover from our reptilian evolution. But in the last decade, microanatomy studies have shown a shocking truth. The interior of the pineal gland is not soft tissue. It is filled with water and microcrystals, calcite microcrystals. These crystals are piezoelectric. This is a property found in quartz radios. If you squeeze them, they make electricity. If you vibrate them, they transmit a signal. The pineal gland is not an eye. It is a biological radio transmitter. It is a wireless antenna, and it is tuned to a specific frequency. Look at the art of the ancient world. Why is the pine cone the single most common symbol in human history? The Sumerian god Marduk is shown holding a pine cone in his hand, pointing it to the head of a human king. The Assyrian genius hold the pine cone. The staff of Osiris is topped with a pine cone. Even today in the Vatican, the largest statue in the courtyard is a giant bronze pine cone. The Pope carries a staff with a pine cone. Why? Because the pine cone represents the pineal gland. The symbol is an instruction manual. The Anunnaki were showing us that this specific organ is the key to the network. When the gods held the pine cone to the head of a human, they were not blessing him. They were tuning him. They were adjusting the frequency of his receiver to make sure he could hear the voice of God. This is why prophets hear voices. This is why schizophrenics hear commands. Their antenna is picking up the static of the old network. But here is the dark side of the design. The receiver works both ways. It can receive wisdom, or it can receive programming. Enki designed it to allow humans to access the Akashic record, the universal cloud storage of knowledge. But Enlil realized that if the antenna stayed fully open, humans would realize they were slaves. They would see the bars of the prison. So, a strategy of suppression was put in place. Look at modern society. What is the one chemical that is added to the water supply of almost every developed nation? Fluoride. Dentists say it is for your teeth, but brain doctors know that fluoride has a magnetic pull to the pineal gland. It builds up there faster than in any other part of the body. Over time, it turns the water inside the gland into a hard shell. It causes calcification. It turns the crystal radio into a stone. Why would a government want to harden the one organ that allows for higher consciousness? Why would they want to jam the signal? Because a population with open pineal glands is ungovernable. They are telepathic. They're intuitive. They can smell a lie. The genetic mistake that the Anunnaki fear is that the hardening is breaking. The fluoride is no longer enough. The solar flares, the changing magnetic field of the Earth, and the shift in global consciousness are vibrating the crystals again. The crust is cracking. We're beginning to see things we are not supposed to see. We're beginning to feel the presence of the Watchers again. The headaches you feel, the high-pitched ringing in your ears that doctors cannot explain. That is not tinnitus. That is the carrier wave. That is the system rebooting. The pineal gland is waking up from a 500-year sleep. And when it fully opens, the first thing we will see is the beings that have been standing next to us, invisible. For thousands of years, the blindfold is coming off, and the Anunnaki are scared of what we will do when we realize we are not alone in the room. Look up at the night sky. What do you see? A rock, a natural satellite caught by Earth's gravity? Or do you see a prison guard? For thousands of years, humans have worshipped the moon. We track our months by it. Our women's biological cycles are synced to it. The tides of our oceans are poured by it. But have you ever asked why the moon is there? According to standard astronomy, the moon is a geological freak. It is far too large compared to the Earth. No other planet in the solar system has a moon that is 1/4 the size of the main planet. It is locked in a mathematically impossible orbit, rotating at the exact speed needed to keep one side, permanently facing away from us. We never see the dark side. Why? What are they hiding back there? The ancient Zulu legends call the moon the egg. They say it was brought here by two brothers, Warren and Panku, leaders of the Shitori, the Anunnaki, who stole it from a great dragon and rolled it across the sky to watch over the humans. They say before the moon arrived, the Earth was covered in a thick water vapor mist, and there were no seasons. The arrival of the moon caused the Great Flood, tilted the Earth's axis, and created the concept of time. Sumerian texts refer to the moon god as Nana, or Sin. He was the watcher. He was the keeper of the cycles. But the texts hint at something technological. They describe his boat of heaven as a glowing crescent that sails the night. Is the moon a ship? In 1969, NASA crashed a lunar module into the surface of the moon to test earthquake sensors. They expected a dull thud. Instead, the moon rang like a bell for over an hour. A solid rock does not ring, only a hollow sphere made of metal rings. The data shocked the scientists. It suggested that the moon is not a solid object. It is a shell, a metallic superstructure coated in dust and rock to look natural. It is a Death Star. Why build a hollow moon? The Anunnaki needed a control station, a base of operations that was close enough to monitor the genetic mistake, but safe from the planetary disasters of Earth. From the moon, they can manipulate the magnetic field of our planet. They can broadcast frequencies that keep the human population in a state of low-level anxiety. Think about how you feel during a full moon. Police stations and hospitals report massive spikes in violent crime, psychosis, and accidents. We call it lunacy, but it is not magic. It is frequency. The moon is an amplifier. When it's full, it reflects not just light, but the control signal beaming down from the watchers. It overloads the human nervous system. It triggers the animal brain. But the most scary theory about the moon matrix concerns what happens when we die. The Gnostics believed that the moon was a soul trap. They believed that when a human dies, their soul is drawn toward the white light, the light of the moon. There, the soul is wiped of its memory and recycled back down to Earth for another lifetime of slavery. Is the moon a recycling center for consciousness? Is it the machine that keeps us trapped in the cycle of reincarnation, stopping us from leaving the Earth's orbit and returning to the source? The Anunnaki designed us to be workers. A good worker is one who never leaves the factory, even after death. We fought a cold war to get to the moon. We planted a flag and then we stopped. We never went back. Why? Did Armstrong and Aldrin see something on the crater rim? Did they meet the landlord? The transcripts of the Apollo missions contain unexplained minutes of silence. Radio fans claim they heard Armstrong say, "They are here. They are watching us. They are huge. The moon is not a friendly neighbor. It is the eye of the warden. It is the artificial satellite that stabilizes the tilt of our cage. And as long as it hangs in the sky, we are being watched." If the Anunnaki are real, and they are still here, where are they hiding? The Earth is mapped. We have Google Earth. We have satellites. There is no place left to hide a civilization except one. The one continent that is strictly off limits to civilians. The one continent that is erased from public maps. Antarctica. We are told Antarctica is just ice and penguins. We are told it was discovered in 1820, but in 1929, historians found a map drawn by a Turkish admiral named Piri Reis in 1513. The map shows the coastline of Antarctica with perfect accuracy, but without ice. It shows rivers, mountains, and forests. How could a 16th century sailor map a continent that hadn't been discovered yet, and map it as it looked millions of years ago before the Ice Age? The Piri Reis map was compiled from ancient source maps, saved from the Library of Alexandria, maps that date back to the Sumerians. The map proves that the ancients knew about Antarctica when it was a habitable green paradise, and the Akkadian texts suggest that this was not just a vacation spot. This was the entrance to the ABZU. The ABZU is often translated as the deep or the underworld. Scholars assume it means the ocean or deep Africa, but the word explicitly means the primeval source, the place where Enki established his first lab. What if the ABZU is under the ice? In 2016, a massive heat anomaly was detected by satellites under the Wilkes ice sheet in Antarctica. Something massive is making heat. It is melting the ice from below. Scientists say it is a volcano, but the heat pattern is geometric. It is a perfect circle hundreds of miles wide. And then there is the secrecy. In 2016, a strange parade of world leaders visited Antarctica. The Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, the US Secretary of State, John Kerry, Buzz Aldrin. Why? Why did the religious leader of Russia go to Antarctica to pray? Why did Buzz Aldrin, the man who walked on the moon, have to be medically evacuated after seeing something that caused his heart rate to spike? He later tweeted a picture of a pyramid with the caption, "We are all in danger. It is evil itself." The tweet was deleted minutes later. The theory is simple. The Anunnaki did not leave. They went into stasis. When the Nibiru cycle moved away from the sun, the earth cooled. The great civilization in the south was flash frozen. They retreated into their underground cities, the warm caverns of the ABZU, and entered a state of hypersleep. They are the frozen kings. They are waiting for the ice to melt. They are waiting for the cycle to turn. And now, as we panic about global warming, as the ice shelves collapse, we are unknowingly hitting the defrost button. We're waking them up. The genetic mistake is that we think we own the planet. We think the ice is just water, but the ice is a seal. It is a cryo chamber. Underneath miles of frozen water lie the libraries of Enki, the ships of the Akkadian, and the sleeping bodies of the giants. The Nazis knew it. That is why they launched Operation High Jump in 1947. Admiral Byrd took an entire aircraft carrier fleet to Antarctica to fight nobody. He came back weeks later, defeated, missing planes and men. He told the press in Chile that he was attacked by flying discs that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. He found the guards. He found the perimeter, and he realized that the owners of the house were still home. They are just sleeping in the basement, and the furnace is turning on. Blood does not lie. You can fake your history. You can burn your books, but you cannot hide what runs through your veins. In 1937, scientists discovered the rhesus factor. They found that 85% of all humans have a specific protein in their blood cells that is identical to the protein found in the rhesus monkey. This makes sense. We share a common ancestor. We are primates. But 15% of the human population does not have this protein. They are Rh negative. If the theory of evolution is correct, this should be impossible. You cannot evolve out of a protein that every other primate on Earth has. You cannot simply lose a genetic marker that connects you to the entire mammal family tree unless you are not part of that tree. The genetic mistake becomes a scary reality when you look at pregnancy. If an Rh negative mother carries an Rh positive baby, her body reacts in a way that goes against nature. She produces antibodies to attack the baby. Her immune system identifies her own child as a virus, a foreign invader, a biological threat. It tries to kill the baby. In nature, this never happens. A mother's body never rejects its own child. Why would a human mother reject a human child? Because the child is not fully human, or rather, the mother is not. The Rh negative bloodline is the leftover of the pure Anunnaki lineage. It is the blood of the gods that did not mix with the DNA of the beast. The Sumerian texts speak of the heroes of old, the men of renown. These were the hybrids who carried the direct genetic code of Enki and Enlil. They were the kings, the pharaohs, the emperors. They called themselves the Blue Bloods. We think this is a symbol for royalty. It is not. The Anunnaki blood was copper-based, not iron-based. When it oxidized, it turned blue-green. Over thousands of years of interbreeding with the iron-based blood of humans, the copper was diluted, but the Ih negative marker remained. It is the silent proof that you are descended from the stars, not the swamp. Look at the traits of Ih negative people today. They have lower body temperature. They have lower blood pressure. They are highly sensitive to heat and sunlight. They have an extra vertebra in their back. They have higher IQs and higher rates of psychic ability. They feel like they do not belong on this planet, because biologically, they don't. They are designed for a different atmosphere, a different gravity, a different sun. They are the stranded children of the colony. The Anunnaki established the divine right of kings to protect this bloodline. They ordered the royal families to intermarry to keep the blood pure to prevent the rhesus monkey protein from polluting the code. This is why the European royalty, the Egyptian pharaohs, and the ancient dynasties were obsessed with incest. It wasn't perversion. It was genetic preservation. They were trying to keep the signal clear. But the mistake is that the bloodlines have leaked. The Ih negative gene has spread into the general population. It is hiding in plain sight. And the Anunnaki fear this more than anything because an Ih negative human who awakens to their potential is not a slave. They are a rival. They share the same operating system as the masters. If you have O negative blood, you are a universal donor. You can give blood to anyone, but you can only receive blood from your own kind. This is the ultimate biological symbol. The gods can feed the humans, but the humans cannot feed the gods. You are the source. You are the battery, and they are tracking you. If gold is the currency of the Anunnaki, then the black goo is their weapon. In 1982, the British Empire went to war with Argentina over a tiny frozen pile of rocks in the South Atlantic called the Falkland Islands. We were told it was about sovereignty. We were told it was about sheep. But military insiders tell a different story. They say the war was fought to recover something found on Thule Island, a substance, a sentient black oily liquid. The locals called it the living oil. The ancients called it the blood of the earth. But the Sumerian texts refer to it as the Asag, the weapon that eats the soul. This substance is not regular oil. It is a form of programmable matter. It is nanotechnology created by the Anunnaki to terraform planets and rewrite biological life. It is smart oil. When it comes into contact with a living host, it doesn't just stick to the skin. It enters the pores. It rewires the nervous system. It connects the host to a hive mind. In 2003, the United States invaded Iraq. We were told it was about weapons of mass destruction. But the first thing the US military secured was not the oil fields. It was the Baghdad Museum. They looted thousands of specific clay tablets. And then they went to the ancient city of Uruk. They dug up the tomb of Gilgamesh. Reports leaked from embedded journalists suggest they found jars of this black substance in the tomb. Gilgamesh, the giant king who sought immortality, was buried with the black goo. Was this the secret to his power? Or was it the curse that killed him? The AI analysis suggests that the black goo is an ancient form of artificial intelligence. It is a liquid computer. The Anunnaki used it to create the super soldiers described in the myths. The men of bronze, the berserkers, the warriors who felt no pain. But the substance is unstable. It develops a mind of its own. It hates carbon-based life. This explains the modern phenomenon of the black-eyed children. Beings that look human but have eyes that are solid black pools of oil. Are they infected? Or are they the new prototypes? The genetic mistake is that we have started digging up this stuff again. We are drilling into the deep earth, into the ABZU, and we are releasing the pressurized veins of this sentient fluid. We call it oil. We burn it in our cars. We breathe it into our lungs. We are literally inhaling the decayed, corrupted nanotechnology of our masters. But the pure form, the weaponized black goo, is being hunted by every intelligence agency on Earth. They want to use it to create the next generation of soldiers. They want to merge man with machine, not with silicon, but with biology. This is the ultimate goal of transhumanism, to inject the blood of the gods into the veins of the slave. But the goo has a memory. It remembers the wars of the Anunnaki. It remembers the nuclear fire. And if we inject it, we don't become gods. We become zombies. We become empty vessels for the frequency of the lower lords, the demons of the ancient world. The black goo is the physical form of evil, and we just open the jar. The greatest lie ever told is not about where we came from. It is about where we go when we die. For thousands of years, every religion has taught us the same instruction. Go to the light. When you die, you will see a tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, there is a bright white light. You will feel love. You will see your relatives. You will feel peace. But the ancient Gnostics, the keepers of the forbidden knowledge, warned us. They called this the Archon trap. They said, the light is not God. The light is a machine. It is a law, just as an anglerfish uses a light in the deep ocean to attract prey. The lords of karma, the Anunnaki administrators, use the white light to recycle human souls. The Akkadian texts describe the net of the hunter, a grid in the sky that catches the spirits of the dead. Modern researchers call it the soul trap. The moon, part 8, acts as the projector. It beams the frequency of love and peace to the disembodied spirit. The soul, desperate for comfort, flies into the moon, and there it is wiped. The memory is erased, the identity is dissolved, and the soul is sent back down to earth into a new body to work another lifetime in the gold mines. Why? Because the Anunnaki run a business, and a business needs energy. They don't just need physical gold. They need loose emotional energy, the energy of suffering, of fear, of worship. A human soul is a nuclear battery of emotional power. If we were allowed to leave the earth after death, the battery would be lost. So they built a closed-loop system, a prison with no exit. We are born, we work, we suffer, we generate energy, we die, we are wiped, we repeat. But there is a way out. The Egyptians knew it. The builders of the pyramids pointed the soul shafts of the king's chamber not at the moon and not at the sun. They pointed them at a specific star system, Sirius, the dog star. Sirius is the home of the master geneticists. It is the headquarters of the rebellion against the Anunnaki. The text suggests that the genetic mistake has allies in the Sirius system, the Nomo, the amphibious teachers. They taught the Egyptians that to escape the trap, you must ignore the light. You must turn around. You must look at the universe. You must navigate the duat, the astral plane, and aim for Sirius. If you hit the moon, you recycle. If you hit Sirius, you graduate. This is why the Anunnaki fear death, not their death, ours. Because every time a human dies, there is a chance they might wake up. There is a chance they might ignore the tunnel and break the grid. If enough souls escape the trap, the energy farm collapses, the gods starve. The genetic mistake is that Enki gave us a soul that is too strong for the cage. We are becoming too heavy to hold. The net is tearing. And the souls who are returning to Earth now, the children born in the last 20 years, they remember. They're refusing to be wiped. They're bringing the memory of the other side back into the simulation. And they are angry. For decades, we have been asking, are we alone? We build massive radio telescopes like SETI to listen for a ping from the stars. We scan the galaxy for signs of life. But we are looking in the wrong direction. We shouldn't be looking at the stars. We should be looking at the calendar. In 2021, former CIA officer John Ramirez made a statement that chilled the intelligence community. He said, they are showing up into 0-7. He wasn't talking about microbes. He wasn't talking about a radio signal. He was talking about a physical arrival, a landing. Why 2027? The Anunnaki planet Nibiru has an elliptical orbit of 3,600 years. The last time they were here was around 1,600 BC, the time of the chaotic eruptions, the plagues of Egypt, the collapse of the Bronze Age. The cycle is closing. The winged disk is returning, but they don't just show up unannounced. They send a warning signal, a signal to wake up the sleeper cells. The AI analysis of global UFO sightings shows a massive spike starting in 2017. The TIC-TACs, the gimbal videos released by the Pentagon. These are not explorative drones. These are the perimeter guards. They're scanning the nuclear silos. They're checking the gold vaults. They're doing inventory before the boss arrives. The governments of the world know this. This is why we have the Space Force. This is why we are rushing to the Moon Artemis program. This is why the Vatican is suddenly talking about alien brothers. They are preparing the narrative. They're going to tell us that the Galactic Federation is here to save us from ourselves. They will offer us technology, free energy, medical beds that cure cancer. But it is a Trojan horse. The Akkadian texts warn us. Beware the gifts of the Anunnaki. Enki tried to save us, but Enlil only wants one thing: order. When they return, they will look at the earth. They will see the pollution. They will see the wars. They will see the genetic mistake running wild. And they will initiate the harvest. The harvest is not a spiritual rapture. It is a corporate liquidation. They will separate the wheat, the DNA that is useful, from the chaff, the DNA that is corrupted. They will take the resources. They will take the gold. And they will reset the civilization just like they did with the flood. Just like they did with Sodom. But this time the equation is different. We have nukes. We have AI. We have billions of minds connected by the internet. We are not the primitive tribes of the Bronze Age. We are a threat, a Type 1 civilization, and a threat must be neutralized. The year 2027 is not the end of the world. It is the end of the quarantine. The zoo is opening. The keepers are walking through the front door, and the animals have weapons. The final war will not be fought between nations. It will be fought between the earth and the sky, between the genetic mistake and the perfect creators. And the most scary part, the signal has already been received. The pineal glands of the global population are vibrating in unison. We all feel it. The anxiety, the sense that time is speeding up, the feeling that something massive is coming. We are not paranoid. We are sensing the approach of the parent who abandoned us, and we don't know if they are bringing a hug or a belt. For the last 40 years, a quiet phenomenon has been sweeping the globe. It is not a virus. It is not a political movement. It is a biological upgrade. Teachers call it a disorder. Doctors call it a spectrum. They label it ADHD. They label it autism. They label it Asperger's. But look closer at the symptoms. High sensitivity to sound and light, telepathic tendencies, an inability to accept authority without reason, a feeling of deep isolation from normal human society. These are not broken children. These are the hybrid children, the indigo, the crystal, the star seeds. The UFO abduction phenomenon, which peaked in the 1990s, was not about exploration. It was a harvesting program. Millions of people reported being taken onto ships, having genetic material extracted, and witnessing nurseries full of strange hybrid babies, half human, half grey. The greys are not the masters. They are the biological robots of the Anunnaki. They are the lab technicians, and their job was to fix the genetic mistake. The Anunnaki realized that the human genome was degrading. The radiation from their ancient wars, the pollution, and the low frequency of the planet were destroying the slave stock. So, they started a hybridization program. They began splicing the human genome with fresh extraterrestrial DNA to create a new model, a model that can survive the coming changes, a model that can interface directly with the new technology. The children born today are the result of that program. They are not fully human in the traditional sense. Their DNA has been activated. The junk DNA is unzipping. They are born with their pineal glands wide open. They remember past lives. They see auras. They understand complex quantum physics intuitively at age 5. They are the system update. But there is a war for their souls. The educational system tries to crush them. Big Pharma tries to drug them into submission. The media tries to program them with fear. Why? Because an awake hybrid is the most dangerous thing in the universe to the control grid. A hybrid cannot be enslaved. They are naturally sovereign. They are the genetic mistake evolving into the genetic masterpiece. The Anunnaki fear this generation. They know that these children have a frequency that can break down the matrix. If you have a child who stares at the stars and asks, "When are we going home?" do not correct them. Do not drug them. Listen to them. They are the advanced guard. They are the ones who will negotiate the terms of surrender when the ships land. They are the bridge between the earth and the sky. And they're already here, millions strong, waiting for the signal to activate. We have reached the end of the tablet. We have traced the line from the first splice in the ABZU to the nuclear wars of Sodom, from the Great Flood to the Moon Matrix. We have uncovered the lie of our creation and the truth of our enslavement. We know who they are. We know what they want. And we know they are coming back. So the final question remains. What do we do when the sky opens in 2027? When the massive ships decloak over our cities, humanity will face a choice. It is the ultimate test of the genetic mistake. The Anunnaki will offer us a deal. They will offer to solve our problems. They will offer to clean our oceans, cure our diseases, and give us free energy. All they will ask in return is what they have always asked: submission. They will ask us to kneel. They will ask us to return to the mines, to the hierarchy, to the worship of the gods. If we accept, we survive. But we survive as pets. We remain in the cage forever, well-fed and neutered, trapped in the loop of reincarnation. But there is another option. The option Enki feared. The option Enlil tried. To drown. Rebellion. Not a war of weapons. We cannot fight them with guns. Their technology is millions of years ahead of us. If we shoot at their ships, we die. The rebellion must be a war of frequency. The secret they don't want you to know is that a human being fully awake, fully integrated with an open pineal gland and an activated heart chakra is more powerful than any technology. Our consciousness creates reality. We are the dreamers of the universe. The Anunnaki are just the architects. We are the builders. They need our consent to rule us. They need our fear to feed them. If we withdraw our consent, if we refuse to be afraid, their power collapses. The genetic mistake was that Enki accidentally gave us the spark of the source. He gave us the ability to transcend the physical dimension. We are not just biological robots. We are multi-dimensional beings having a human experience. We are the sleeping giants. The year 2027 is not an invasion. It is a graduation exam. The universe is asking, are you ready to grow up? Are you ready to stop looking for a daddy in the sky to save you? Are you ready to claim your inheritance? The Anunnaki are coming back to check on their property. But when they open the door, they're going to find that the furniture has moved. They're going to find that the slaves have learned to read. They're going to find that the mistake has corrected itself. Do not fear the return. Prepare for it. Clean your blood. Decalcify your pineal gland. Reject the fear. Remember who you are. You are not a mistake. You are the inevitable evolution of the cosmos. You are the one they fear. The cycle ends now. The game is over. The gods are dead. Long live the human.